Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Cheryl Miller and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in South Australia. The following video was originally recorded as a Facebook Live in my Stampin' Up! Group. So welcome to Whimsy Wednesday number 57. It's Wednesday in Australia, Wednesday morning. It may be Tuesday where you are in the world, Tuesday evening. Today I have a card that I've created with the Painted Poppies set and I hate it. Not often I say that about a card, but I really do not like this card. There are very many elements to it which are just wrong. I misplaced this little die in the background, the cutout die. It's too far up to the top this way, backwards I am. So it's unbalanced, which is why I had to put these little leaves down over here in the corner. I don't particularly like the centers of the poppies, which are die cut from that Poppy Moments die set. The black is a little bit too heavy for me, especially with the Blackberry Bliss. So this was just totally wrong. There's a big gap here. I started off with 3 flowers because I like odd numbers. It didn't work well. I had to put another flower in over here, and now I've got 4, and it just doesn't do it for me. You know, it's pretty enough now that I've sort of juggled with it, and I will use it, but it's definitely not one of my greater design moments. So we're going to fix that today. I'm going to flip you around and we are going to try and fix the issues that are annoying me about this card. So I'll turn you back around the right way, and I will flip you around so we can head on over to the craft. And let's have a closer look at this card. Okay, so you can see where, before I had the leaves on here, you can see that it's all way up in one corner, very unbalanced. Hello, Barb. It has a big gap here. This flower wasn't here to start with, and it just didn't look right. So I added this flower in, and then of course now I've got 4 flowers, which really worries me. I've die cut the little poppy centers, which I just think are maybe a little bit too heavy for this card when I'm using Blackberry Bliss, which is a very dark color anyway. Just need bling on the message bit. Well, I could add some bling in there, I guess. But by this stage, I've added so many things to this card. I added these little black leaves to try and make the black not so strange on the flowers. I just kept adding to it and adding to it and adding to it, and I still don't like it. So we're going to fix that. I need to create a card for the Colour Inspiration Challenge. So if you are watching this live, you still have time. It finishes on Monday. You still have time to get in on that challenge. Just go onto Facebook, search for Colour Inspiration Challenges. It will come up. It's a very easy colour challenge to enter. You just need to load a card up. It is a Stampin' Up! Site, so obviously it's Stampin' Up! Products, but you do need to you can load your card up onto Facebook. You don't need a blog, you don't need Pinterest, you don't need Instagram. You can just load your card up and be part of the challenge. So head on over and do that if you're watching this live. If you're watching this on the YouTube video after Saturday, then you will have a couple of days, but not much time to get your challenge entry in. So the colour challenge colours for this fortnight are, and I only have 3 of them here, are Highland Heather, Pear Pizzazz, Grey Granite and Pool Party. I'm using the 3 inks and Pool Party cardstock. So you can see that I'm changing the colours up a lot, moving away from that contrast of the Blackberry Bliss and the yellow and the Mango Melody, which are highly contrasting colours. We're moving into a softer palette. So to start with, I'm going to bring the Big Shot in and we'll do the die cutting of that little background piece. So that background piece is actually in the Poppy Moments dies. And it is, oh, it's not going to come out. I have to fish for it. This little one. So this cuts out the little background pattern, and then I've laid it over a colour. So we'll do that first and get that out of the road. We don't have to do too much die cutting today because I have pre-done a lot of it. But for this bit, we will need to do some. So I'll just bring in my big shot. I have a sheet of Whisper White cardstock, and I believe it's 14 by 9.7 centimetres. I'm not sure what that equates to in inches or for your card size in the US. Now, I don't want to make the same mistake that I made in the first card and put this way up to the top corner, which is what I did. I want to bring it in a little bit because I want to keep an equidistant border around the edge of this piece. So I know that I need to bring it in a little bit purely by making that mistake the first time. Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, that's right. You put it. There's a lot of girls on here that have put an entry in the challenge. I'm so impressed. All right, so normally I would die cut this with the blades up, but because I really need to position this and I don't want to put tape on it because it might rip my card, I'm going to do this one with the blades, the cutting blades down. So I'm going to do one cut this way. Look at that. So then I'll leave my little brush. I'm going to make a bit of a mess here. Just grab my little brush. Pop all those pieces out. I should have my little foam mat. I don't know where it is at the moment. So we'll just pop them out onto the plate and I'll tip that into the rubbish bin. Well, actually, I'll just tip that onto the floor and I'll vacuum it up in a minute. All right, so we've got a couple of little stray pieces still stuck in there. Let's got all those out. And now I want to come across the page at the top because I've got pattern down here and across here. So we'll just flip the die around and pop it fairly close to the existing die cut. Something like that. We're going to have a strange little gap here, but we'll cover that over. So now I've sort of got an equidistant, oh, you can't see that, let me move you over. Sort of got equidistant here and here, and here and here. So now once again, you are going to hear my tummy rumbling. I have not had anything to eat this morning, well, not since very early this morning. So once again, it's Let's Rumble with Cheryl. There's a few little bits stuck in there. I will take those out later. Oh, excuse my belly. I really should have had a coffee before I came on live. So there we have our background piece, die cut. I'll move this out of the road. And card front wise, we've got a standard C6 in Australia. I think it's A2, is that what it's called? I should write that in on big letters on my window, and that's going to fit that layer on there. But of course you can't see the pattern very well. So I've got that piece of pool party cardstock that is going to go underneath there so you can actually see the pattern. So we'll glue the pool party cardstock onto the card front first. Whoops. There's my second whoops. Just going to pull that ink in so it doesn't come out everywhere. Place that centrally. Hopefully by next week I'll have different nails. You won't have to look at my fluoro pink nails. And then that one's going to glue down onto there. So I'll just go around the outside. Oops, that's the third oops. Who's counting my oopses? We need to have competition. How many oopses? And I'll just put a little dab of glue in the center of each of those flowers. And we'll pop that down over the top. So. And there's our pool party element to our card. Hello Jackie, that's right, we've just started. Now, the next element will be, and I've done it again. Now, I'm going to have to fix it. I'm supposed to have spritzed this. You can see I've spritzed in here, and that's just to add a different element to the background because we are layering things over the top. I'm going to do it, even though it does mean that it will probably end up with some spritz in the outside piece. We'll just run with it because I really, really like that spritzed element on this card. Oops, yeah. You'll start counting? Good, thank you, Barb. I'm not sure if I want to know how many oopses I have, really. So I've got some Pool Party ink refill. I'm just going to put a very small couple of drops onto my block. Should zoom you in just a fraction, I guess. And then I've got some rubbing alcohol. Now I'm using rubbing alcohol purely because it dries quicker than water, but you can certainly use water. I maybe could mask it. Oh, excuse me, that's my belly. I promise you that is my belly that's making those noises. The girls who come along regularly know that, oh, that's too much. Know that that's a little bit of an issue. Let's just soak up some of that rubbing alcohol. With me, anybody who's new, I apologise. That's just something that I get too busy to have anything to eat, and then I have a very loud, grumbly tummy. All right, I'm just soaking up some of the alcohol. We don't need very much, so that will work. Masking. Masking, masking, masking. Rightio. You've given me a challenge there, Monica. So let's do this. Now, one of my videos takes long. Actually, I need to turn the alarm off. I hold myself accountable and I set an alarm, and then about this far in I realise I am never going to come in at 45 minutes, so I'll need to go in and turn the alarm off or I'll cut you off. So I probably should have cut these on the trimmer so they were straight. This is very much, you know, don't craft like this at home. There we go. All right, I've got a little paintbrush here. All right, I'm going to mix up that little blue coloured stuff that I've just created. So I haven't got much left in this paintbrush. It's filled the paintbrush. So now I'm going to just do a little bit of a tap across my card like so. Thank you, Monica. Great idea. Pop that all over there out of the road. And there we've got some spritzing, some splattering, I guess you call it. All right, so, okay, we'll pop that aside for a minute. We'll move on to the flowers. Now I'm working with the Fluid 100 watercolour paper for the flowers. I haven't done watercolouring for a little while, so this was quite interesting. I will use my Stamparatus to stamp these images. So I'll quickly bring that in. This is the foam that came, I think it came in the Stamparatus case. I found that it works fairly well Well, maybe not today because I haven't got this underneath here. Works fairly well to hold this up nice and tight for me, nice and flat. So we will be stamping the round poppy and the smaller poppy and the leaves. So this one, and this one. Just that little leaf. I'm not going to do this leaf because it needs to be fussy cut, and I'm not doing fussy cutting today. Okay, I'm getting so good at this, sort of. So the only reason that I'm really using the Stamparatus, because these don't need to be positioned, we're going to die cut them, is because I'm using StazOn. And sometimes StazOn on watercolour paper means that hopefully this is my inked up StazOn, means that you sometimes need to re-stamp it. That's all right, Barb. I think you'd run out of numbers. You'd run out of toes and fingers. So yeah, sometimes with the StazOn, it does need a second ink. However, now you'll see that the center, now this is a combination of being the watercolor paper and being the StazOn ink and being such a fine image in the middle. That middle bit is a little bit grey, not as dark as the stamp itself has quite a dark center. That's not as dark, but it doesn't matter because we're going to fix that after we've watercolored. So I'll need a couple of these. I'm not going to take too much time with the stamping, mainly because I've already pre-done these, but I did want to show you how I watercolored them. Okay, and to clean this off, you will need your StazOn cleaner and a cloth. So then we'll do, when you need a few, I've stamped three of the big ones and 3 of the smaller ones. I'm not stamping that many now, but so we'll just do one of these. And then we'll do 2 of the leaves, if I can fit them on that piece. Again, clean it off with the StazOn cleaner. And then just take any excess cleaner off with your chamois. And we'll pop the leaf down on here. I'll probably be able to get 2 there. The leaf stamps beautifully, not an issue there. Okay, so I did quite a number of leaves, probably 7, 8, maybe even 9, depending on how many you want to use on the inside. But they're very easy to stamp. And there's 2 dies. So that also makes them very easy to die cut, because you can cut 2 at a time. Okay, so that's my stamping done. We will need the Stamparatus again in a second, but for now we'll just move that out of the road. And I'm going to use blocks as palettes. I'm going to stamp my poppies with the Highland Heather, and I'm going to stamp my leaves with the Pear Pizzazz. So they're the challenge colours. So I'll grab my, oh dear, it doesn't have much water in it. Let's see if this is a nice fine one. Bonus. Brand new one with water in it. Perfect. The newer ink pads are harder to squeeze into the lid. I'll just use the the block, and I will probably need, oh, we're not doing as many, but when you're doing the whole lot of the flowers, you probably will need to replace that. And then the green, it will squeeze in. This is an old style, but I'll still use the block. Just keep it neat, tidy. So let's do the green first. Grab some paper towel. Get this leaf out of the road. So you just add water and then just colour in. Now, as I always say, I am not in any way, shape or form a colouring artist. I just try and stay between the lines. Doesn't always work. So I've just laid down a light layer of the pear pizzazz. See if I can see. Oh, there we go. And I'll take the excess water out of there, and then I'll just pick up some of the ink without putting too much water in it, so I get a slightly darker shade of pear pizzazz, and just add it to the middle. Now it does blend in fairly well because that's obviously wet, but you will, once it's dried, end up with, because I'm not actually blending it in, I'm just adding the colour over the top, you will end up with a line, a watercolour line, which is great because it makes it look like it's been watercoloured. And that's your little leaves done. Now again, you know, you just need to sit down and relax and do this, because I think I did about 9 leaves in total for my card. They're all pre-done over here. So let's move on to the flowers. So again, I've cleaned my brush off. And I'm just going to put a light layer of Highland Heather over the whole of the flower. Not worrying too much about getting exactly to the edges, because I quite like that little watercolory look where it hasn't gone right to the edges. So that's the light shade. I'm just going to set that aside for a wee minute and paint one of these ones up. So you see I've just gone straight over that middle section. Water, I think. There we go. I've got too much water. Let's pick some of it up. Okay, and then come back to this one. Cleaning my brush off, and I'm going to pick up some of this darker ink, go over the center and just bring that in, and then clean my brush off and just blend those edges in. A little bit. I'm just going to clean this off and put some fresh ink down on here because I don't want all that watery mess in the middle. I'll just paint these little edges here with fairly intense strength ink. That's it for a minute, and then we'll do the same sort of thing with the more intense strength ink on the bigger flower. Now of course, as per normal, I'm rushing a little bit, so you could take your time a little bit more. You'll probably get a much nicer result. Yeah, I try and colour between the lines. I was always a bit of a perfectionist in that regard, but I have learned over the years to not stress if you do go outside the lines, because hey, really, it's just a card. And if anybody got a card from me that did have colouring outside the lines, they would probably think to themselves, that is so Cheryl. It's quite frequently outside the lines. Now we are going to die cut these, and they die cut fairly well. There's a little white border. And then when they dry off, you end up with a bit of a more of a watercolory effect, because those darker lines, you get a little line around where they dry. So there we've got 1 and 2. And you'll see that I've left this bit here on this petal white and put the dark bit underneath, which does tend to make that look like it's popped up. It's just practicing, Anne-Marie. It's just over and over and over again, and not stressing. Like a few years ago, if you told me I would colour in front of people live on Facebook, I would never have believed you, because I don't really have that much confidence in my colouring. But I've worked out that, you know, it normally looks all right, no matter what you do. We have the beauty of having these beautiful outlines to work to from Stampin' Up. If I had to actually colour a flower on my own, I'm not quite sure how I'd go. So you'd need to let those dry and then die cut them with, I'll just get rid of some of my stuff that's floating around here. Die cut them with the dies out of the Painted Labels dies. So this is the one that does come bundled with the stamps. And you'll see that the dies, that's not the right one, that one goes on there. The dies will cut these out. And you've got 2 leaf dies, so you could run all of this through at the same time. Set them all up. Which is why when I stamp my images, I don't stamp them too close together, so that I do have room for the die in between. And then this one you have to fiddle with to get the... And they would run through as many as you wanted. Once they're dry, don't try and do it while it's wet. Once they're totally dry, and then you end up with a whole garden of little flowers. And I'll put these aside because I probably will need those leaves in a minute. A whole series of leaves and dies. Now I'm just going to try and, oh, it worked. Bonus. Zoom you out a fraction. So I've got 3 large dies. One is for the inside of the card. You can see some of these have got the little watercolour mark around them, but it doesn't matter. And 3 for the outside. So these ones are going on the front, so there's 5, and then I've just got 1 for the inside. Now I'll probably use all of these leaves. There's 2, 4, 6, 7 on the outside, and I would need to do a couple more for the inside. So I've got those ones stamped, they're drying, and I'll just quickly die cut them at the end. So I'll pop this one aside because that's for the inside, and these are the ones that we'll use for the outside. Now before we go any further, I wanted to show you how I dealt with the inside of the poppy, which has got quite indistinct now that we've watercoloured over it, and I've made that centre quite dark. So I do want them to be a little bit darker. Oh, look how lovely these leaves came out with the little watercolour once it dries off. They're beautiful, they look. Now that's not blended watercolouring, that's getting that watercolour look on purpose. If I'd wanted it to blend, I would have coloured right out to the edge, added the dark in the middle, and then coloured right back out to the edge again. But I did want the distinct 2 greens in my leaf. So for the inside, to do those stamens, rather than put these dies on here, look at the difference. These are so much, oh, the yellow's pretty until I put these hairy spidery things in the middle of them, which are very, very intense. So I don't want to do that on these ones. I'm going to try and leave them a little more natural looking. So I've grabbed my basic black Stampin' Blend. So this is the dark shade. Now you could probably use the Stampin' Right marker as well, because as long as these are dry and you're not adding any more water, that should stay in place. But in this instance, I'll use the Stampin' Blend. So I'll just try, that's it. So we'll do all of these. Now you don't want to just colour it, you want to retain that beautiful dappled texture. So take the bullet point and just tap. So I'm doing little dots. And you still end up with the texture, but it's just so much darker. So this is the difference. It's quite a lot. It stands out quite a lot more. So let's do this one. So dot, dot, dot. So you're still getting some of the lighter shade through, and just a little, just bringing it out. The larger flower will obviously take a little bit more time, but don't be tempted to go really quickly and hard. Keep those dots light, because otherwise you do end up with a big black solid piece in the middle, and you don't want that. You want it to still look textured. Something like that. So it's making them stand out and be dark, but not be quite as overpowering as the die cuts were. Still having a little bit of texture. And there we go. So that's, I had previously done this one. So that's our 5 flowers and all our leaves done. Now there is another step in between. I could have just popped these onto here and put my greeting over the spotty bit, but I wanted to have another element to the card, and I've pulled out my Stitched So Sweetly dies. Now these dies are amazing. They were one of the first things that I purchased. I'm just going to try and zoom you out a bit. They're one of the first things that I purchased from the mini catalogue. There we go. So they have a series of this scalloped stitched rectangles, and then they also have these gorgeous little shapes that all layer on top of one another if you want to, or layer on top of these ones, fit a multitude of different greetings. They're perfect. They're just wonderful, wonderful tools to have. So it's a great set to have on hand. So I've used the largest of the stitched scallop rectangles, and I've cut a piece out of Whisper White cardstock to be just a little extra frame for my poppies. Of course, when you put it down over here, you do not see any of this beautiful element anymore. But if I used a smaller die, it's not long enough at the bottom. So I still want it this length this way. Now I could have come in and die cut this and made it smaller by running it back through the Big Shot. However, it doesn't really matter because we're going to cover over, as you can see here, we're going to cover over the top of it anyway. So all I did was I just popped this down here, remembering that I want this distance down here to be sort of the same as this distance here. Move it over there, grab a pencil and just make a mark here and here. And then I'm just going to cut that in a bit of a circular shape like that. So then all of this cut will be covered by my spray of flowers. Just close this ink pad up. So my greeting is going to sit on there. You've got that extra little scalloped and stitched feature, and it's going to make the flowers look like they're sitting on some sort of frame, and it's given us a nice clean background to put our greeting on. So we'll quickly stamp that up. I'm using Thank You. I grab my Stamparatus for a minute. I make a lot of thank you cards, and I love this little it's a very happy font, this one. I'll just use my stamp set quickly for my balancing act here. Now I do want to use my index imaging sheet for this because this is a rubber stamp, and even though I try to be very careful about getting my index images on the top, quite often they're not quite exact. I'm sometimes not very good at that. So I will use my polypropylene sheet. So if there are any new people on here who haven't seen me use the polypropylene sheet before, it's just a flexible sheet of plastic. It's polypropylene that you can get from a stationer, and I've cut it down to fit into the Stamparatus. I put some sort of mark up in the corner, and I know that that's the corner that always goes into the corner where the two hinges meet on the Stamparatus. This is very much like the old Stampin' Majig. It's the same principle. I usually work out to this side because it gives me room to move my card around. Can you hear my roosters? I don't know, they must be having a little altercation with the rabbit. So I'll hold my polypropylene sheet down in place. Yes, it is a beautiful font, Monica, and we'll stamp our index image with Memento because that's nice and easy to clean off. So this is now our index image. We'll take this ink off because I'm going to stamp in grey granite. That's one of the challenge colours. I have my grey granite ink pad. I can now bring in my piece of cardstock, pop it underneath here, and know that I can line it up to exactly where I want it to be. And I know that it's not going to be even a little bit out, which it may be because the index image might not match on the stamp, might not match the rubber exactly. But I know that I can move this around and get it straight. Right down in this corner. Then the reason this needs to be flexible is because you need to be able to lift it up to pop the magnet underneath. So you need to be able to bend it up to pop the magnet in place to hold the cardstock down when you remove that piece. Ink this up. And you now know that that is going to stamp exactly where that index image was. And as long as you don't move the stamp off the plate, and as long as this corner butts up into where the two hinges meet, you know that that's going to work. So if you're going to be doing multiple cards, you can now bring all of your pieces in and just stamp them all really quickly and know that you can position them exactly where you want to. There are a lot of other ways to position your cardstock. Put it up in the corner, lay it down the bottom against here. There are a lot of other ways to position your stamps in your Stamparatus. There are a multitude of ways. This is just the way that I found has worked for me, and I use my polypropylene sheets. I have multiple polypropylene sheets, and as you can see by the state of this one, it's starting to get quite stained. I use them frequently. Once you remove the stamp from the plate, you may as well rub this out because it doesn't apply anymore. And I'll just put that over there for those because I don't know where the stamp set is. And so now we've got our little thank you exactly nice and straight in the corner. Pop this out of the road. I don't know what's going on out there with my chickens. So now this is going to go just down here. Those pencil marks will be covered, and I just want to cover all of the blue on this side and bring this in. So now you can see that I've got a fairly central element. So this is now a rectangle with equidistant borders all the way around the outside. So I've solved the issue of having this piece way too far up into the corner. This can just be glued on flat. I've also bought in my grey granite element to the card. Suit the challenge. Just make sure that's straight. So now we can pop our flowers down. So let's bring them in. Bring in my... Oh, what's that noise? Something on my computer. So to put my 5 flowers on, and I will tell you that I have pre-organized where all this goes, so I'm not going to take ages sitting here, which normally I do, working out where everything goes. So this edge of the floral spray is going to come down and cover up this corner, and this edge is going to cover up this corner here. And then this one will go here somewhere like that. So we're not ending up with a huge open space here. Just got a nice little place for our greeting. We've got a nice little spray of flowers, and then we'll be able to tuck the leaves in underneath. Now I've got one grey granite element here, and if I'm going to have a colour in a card, I like to have it repeating somewhere in the card. So I need to add a grey granite element. So what I decided to do, and I will need to bring the big shot in very quickly, just for a minute, and I'm going to use one of the leaf elements from the Poppy Moments die set. Now this is the same one that we did that cutout background from. So I'm going to include some of this little very skinny sprig shape. Hello Judy. So this is normally the one that sits over the top of the larger piece, but I'm just going to use it on its own, and I'm going to cut it out of grey granite. So we're going to have a very, I call it floresty, floresty element to our spray of poppies by introducing some grey granite foliage in behind. So while I'm here, I will also, hopefully, those leaves are dry that I just watercoloured. So while I've got the big shot, this is that piece once it's cut out. Beautiful and fine. Be great contrast for the fullness of the poppies. But I did watercolour these leaves, and hopefully they're dry. Yep, they're fairly dry. So with one pass of the big shot, I will be able to die cut these. Now this is a magnetic platform, however, my plates need to be replaced. I need a new set of plates, so they're a bit bendy. So I'm then going to tape these down because the magnet isn't working very well. I'm going to run them through this way. We'll tape them in place. And pop the top on and run that through. I'm not worrying about the flower because I do have enough flowers. I'll do that later when I go to do the inside. And there we have our little leaves cut out. Pop those down over there with those ones. Get rid of this. And now we are really ready to put all this together. So I have previously die cut a few more of these grey granite leaves, and they are very long and they run the risk of sticking out the bottom, so it's just easier to go through and nip off the bottom 2 leaves. So do a little bit of floristry here. And you could keep those and use them on the inside of the card. So that's roughly where I want my flowers. So these are going to go underneath, and I have already, as I said, I've already done this. I've already worked out the design of where I want everything to lay out, so I'm not umming and ahhing live. So we'll have one down there, one up the top here. So remember this little strange part where the dies met? I do want to cover that over with leaves. So this will go in here somewhere. And this one can go over here. So I know that's roughly where I want them. So I'll just take these flowers away for a minute. Oops. There's another one. There's another one, Barb. And you don't need very much glue for these, and they look quite nice if they're a bit soft and lifty around the edges. So just put a couple of tiny little dots in here. They're going to be held in place by other leaves and flowers anyway. So just tiny, tiny little dots, so you don't want a big gluey mess. So some of these will get covered over anyway. Some of these lower leaves, but that's okay. You're never quite sure until it all comes together, so we'll just put them in anyway. Hold that down, we'll need that glue. And then we'll go and put the flowers down, and then we'll tuck the little green leaves in underneath. Now we'll see that may need a little bit of extra glue under there. I'll just pop that down there now. Alright, so can we remember how we wanted these flowers? I'm going to glue the smaller ones flat, and I'm just going to put a little bit of glue in the middle so that I can pop my leaves in underneath. So remembering that we do want to see some of this gorgeous blue background. Oops. So I'll just bring that down. Hold it in place for a minute. Then we've got one down on this end. I'm going to put a leaf in to cover that edge, but I will cover the blue. Hold that in place. So now this one's the tricky one. So you don't want to cover up too much of this blue, but you also don't want it so that the big flower covers over the middle of the flower. So we've just got to make sure that we've got enough space, which we appear to have. Depending on how we position that, that should be pretty good, something like that. I've gone outside the lines on this one, so it'd be really nice if we could cover over that bit. And this one's going to sit in here like this. Something like that. So we'll put these ones up with dimensionals. So I'll just grab those. I will hold these together. Flip them over. It's just a memory jogger for where I had them positioned that I like. Okay, and we'll just pop a few. Now again, you don't want to go right to the edge because we do want to pop some leaves in underneath. But you also want them to be nicely held up with no saggy bits. Not that there'd be very many saggy bits with watercolour paper. That's fairly robust. Now, how did we have these? Something like that. Okay, so those ones are mounted up, and we've got our grey granite foliage in, so now we can go ahead and work out where we want these bits. Now, you may, because of, depending on how much glue you've put in, you may need to cut these flowers down. I'm just going to put them roughly in where I want them, and then I'll come back and see that that was fairly well glued down. It's not going to go in, so you'll need to cut the leaves off. This is going to cover up that small little glitchy bit in the middle there. So I'll just get them positioned where I want them. Now the only unfortunate thing about these leaves is that they all orient the same way. So they all flow in this direction. So you need to be a little bit careful that it doesn't end up looking like a wreath. This one's going to come down here and hold that bit. Okay, so they'll be in a little bit further, but that's roughly where I want to stick them. So this one is not going to go in all that way, so I'm going to have to cut some of that off. A little bit more floristry work. This one will probably have to be cut off too. I put a lot of glue on that flower, obviously. It's a good thing about the green glue, it does give you a bit of leeway to move around, which is nice. Get in underneath there. Right, hold that down until it's dry. Now this one will definitely have to cut off.
Just do this one, something like that. So
I might just nip off the end. So the trick with your leaves is to have them at different angles and different lengths. If you put them all similar, so you can see that this is not looking like a wreath now, even though they all orient the same way, it's not going around in a circle, just because putting them at different lengths and different angles. Putting a lot of glue on these. No, they're never coming off. How much can I get underneath here? So I don't want to totally cover up my little grey granite bits now that I've gone and put them all there. Oh, this one's almost stuck already. Just going to trim off this little end here. Like so. And then I've got two bits for my inside. Now I have done an inside. Where did I put it? Over here. I started one. And that's what I'll use these two leaves for. So I've just got a Highland Heather panel and a Whisper White panel, and I stamped Life is Better with a Friend Like You in grey granite. I've already glued down my full flower, and I've stuck in, and it's not glued, but I've stuck in underneath there one of those spare bits of that grey granite foliage. And then cut these bits off here. And because I've only glued down the centre of the flower, I've got lots of leeway to stick these two leaves in underneath here. I think I have a better check, I guess, before I whack glue on there, hey? Yeah, I think so. So I'm not going to glue that piece down. I'm hoping that the glue that goes on these leaves will help glue that down. Hoping. Just better check this one. I might take a bit off that one. Hello Sharon, we're just about done. I think you'll like this card. You'll hate the first one I did, but you'll love this one. So I'm just going to fiddle around here a little bit. I've got a space there that I don't like anymore, so I can go down in there. Like so. So that's my inside. I'll just quickly glue that together. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to post this blog post. The challenge finishes on Monday. I'm just going to take that bit of glue off there. Challenge finishes on Monday, and this will go up on my blog on Saturday, and also go up onto the challenge page at that time as well. And this Facebook Live will go up onto YouTube. I'm on a bit of a mission to get these up on YouTube. No matter how many oopses, that goes in there like that. And if you push all the other stuff out of the road now, this is what the card ends up looking like. Much, much nicer. Fixed a few. Now let's bring in the yucky one. There is no comparison. There is just no comparison. So I fixed all of the things that I didn't like about this card. I've fixed. Now I've got my 5 elements. I've brought this piece down, and I've got a nice centrally layered sort of panel, visual panel. And I've incorporated all the colours that I need. I only added these little black things because of these huge black centres in the flowers, so we fixed that. I've now added the softer grey granite in behind. The colour scheme is far more pleasing than this colour scheme. So this card will not go to a crafter. This card will go to someone who doesn't craft and wouldn't really know about all of the things that are wrong with it. But this card will go to a treasured friend. So I do hope you have enjoyed. Anne-Marie, I'm sure you will do beautifully. I love to see it when people case my cards. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed today, and next week we're back to an evening time slot in Australia, so that means very early morning for some of you. You may have to catch me on the replay. Thank you very much, ladies. Thank you for coming along, and I will hide this one, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks. Bye.